She fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on an autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. It took her a long time to fall. In fear, or maybe hope, she clutched a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downwards, she saw only dark water below. But in that emptiness there were many eyes gazing up at the sudden shaft of light. They saw there a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. As it grew closer, they could see that it was a woman, arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled towards them. The geese nodded at one another, and rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath to break her fall. Far from the only home she'd ever known, she caught her breath at the warm embrace of soft feathers as they gently carried her downward. And so it began. The geese could not hold the woman above the water for much longer, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she saw them all gather, loons, otters, swans, beavers, fish of all kinds. A great turtle floated in their midst and offered his back for her to rest upon. Gratefully, she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home and discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water and agreed to go find some. Loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a long while he surfaced with nothing to show for his efforts. One by one, the other animals offered to help. Otter, beaver, sturgeon. But the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest of swimmers. They returned, gasping for air, with their heads ringing. Some did not return at all. Soon only little Muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go while the others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, fearing the worst for their relative, and before long a stream of bubbles rose with the small, limp body of the muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human. But then the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back, and I will hold it." Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the shell of the turtle. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance, her feet caressing the earth. The land grew and grew as she danced her thanks, from the dab of mud on Turtle's back until the whole earth was made. Not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all the animals' gifts coupled with her deep gratitude. Together they formed what we know today as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clutched in her hand. When she toppled from the hole in the sky world, she had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were branches, fruits, and seeds of all kinds of plants. These she scattered onto the new ground, and carefully tended each one until the world turned from brown to green. Sunlight streamed through the hole from the sky world, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals, too, had plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island. Land is water, dirt, air, fire, sun, jungle, mountain, forest, lake, desert, star, leaves, sky, Animals, plants, boulders, maple, ground ivy, plantain, walnut, tomato, oak, daffodil, corn.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, the land is having something solid beneath your feet. I mean, it's the earth that we stand on and walk on.
I think a land is alive.
Land for me means soil. Like all the humans, we are directly connected with the soil. Matter of fact, the word human comes from humus, which we can consider the blood of the soil.
Working with my hands in the dirt most days. Working with animals, working with plants.
Taking in the beauty of land has had like a huge impact. I remember so well the first time walking up to the edge of the Grand Canyon and looking out over that immense space and the beautiful scene.
A cultural story that presents land as a resource and something that can be extracted from.
I'll just never forget
at all costs.
Like the inner experience of first seeing that. That
like
was very
humans
powerful.
can always make the decisions and decide to take whatever they want to take.
We completely destroy the soil in the Middle West.
It's like crawling
because we are in
into
environmental
bed with a
emergency.
blanket.
There's no way
Seeing the land
that
around
you
me,
will
it
survive
just
with
feels
this
so
way
wonderful.
to live. We are completely insane. We squeeze it for another 20 years and then what? Then we run out of soil. We cannot grow anything. In the desert we can take us.
People do all this
what
insanity
when we have only one planet? It don't make no sense to destroy it. We just crossed the 400 part per billion of CO2, which last time was like a million years ago. The future generations they have no chance to survive on this planet.
Deforestation, erosion, death, extinction, poison, colonial genocide, killing, power, pesticide, fracking, oil, money, ownership. Why? How? More. Because. More. More. Once upon a time, in a small village, people used barter for all their transactions. On every market day, people walked around with chickens, eggs, hams, and breads, and engaged in prolonged negotiations among themselves to exchange what they needed. At key periods of the year, like harvest, people recalled the tradition of helping each other out. They knew that if they had problems someday, others would aid them in return. One market day, a stranger with shiny black shoes and an elegant white hat came by and observed the whole process with a sardonic smile. When he saw one farmer running around to corral the 6 chickens he wanted to exchange for a big ham, he could not refrain from laughing. "Poor people," he said, "so primitive." The farmer's wife overheard him and challenged the stranger. "Do you think you can do a better job handling chickens?" "Chickens? No," responded the stranger, "but there is a much better way to eliminate all that hassle." "Oh, yes? How so?" asked the woman. "See that tree there?" the stranger replied. "Well, I will go wait there for one of you to bring me 1 large cowhide. Then have every family visit me. I'll explain the better way." And so it happened. He took the cowhide and cut perfect leather rounds into it, and put an elaborate and graceful little stamp on each round. Then he gave to each family 10 rounds, and explained that each represented the value of 1 chicken. "Now you can trade and bargain with the rounds instead of the unwieldy chickens," he explained. It made sense. Everybody was impressed with the man in the shiny shoes and inspiring hat. "Oh, by the way," he added, after every family had received their 10 rounds, "in a year's time I will come back and sit under that same tree. I want you to each bring me back 11 rounds. That 11th round is a token of appreciation for the technological improvement I just made possible in your lives." "But where will the 11th round come from?" asked the farmer with the 6 chickens. "You'll see," said the man with a reassuring smile. As time went on, the villagers realized that in order to provide the 11th round, one of each 11 families would have to lose all of its rounds, even if everybody managed their affairs well. So, when the man came back the next year, The villagers asked, "Could you make us more rounds so none of us need to go bankrupt?" The man in the hat said, "Well, no, I can only make rounds for people who have enough chickens. Then, if you can't give me my rounds back, I can seize your chickens instead. But if you can convince me that you will increase chicken production and have more chickens in the future, and that you are trustworthy, I will lend you more rounds now. I'll lend them at 10% interest. So if you're clever and increase your production by 20%, then you can pay me back and get rich too." But the villagers said, "If you're lending the new rounds at 10% interest, there still won't be enough rounds to pay you back in the end." "Never you worry," said the man, "because by that time I will have made more rounds, and I will always be willing to lend more of them as long as you can keep increasing chicken production. As long as you work hard and keep growing more chickens, there will never be a problem." So the villagers grew their flocks, enough every year to pay back the man in the hat. Only some folks couldn't keep up and went bankrupt for whatever reason, and their flocks were bought out by others who became their employers. Chicken production grew by 10% every year to keep up with the man in the hat and others like him who joined the game. The village grew, and there were more and more chickens. So many that everyone was sick of everything chicken-related. But still, the villagers spent all of their energy producing more chickens. "We must increase demand for chickens and work harder to grow more, so we can all become rich." After years of this, people began to notice that the once green hillsides turned to grain production for the chickens were now eroding fields of dirt, and the once clear streams were now clogged with chicken shit. To the concerned villagers, the man in the hat said in reassuring tones, "Don't worry, there are more fields and more streams in other villages, and we can farm out chicken production to them. We can't end growth now. How would your neighbors pay their debts? How would I create more rounds? Even I would go bankrupt." And so all of the villages turned from green to brown as they were overrun with growing flocks of chickens, and villagers fought each other for the remaining green spaces that could support a few more years of growth. But eventually, there was little left to turn towards chicken production, and the pace of growth slowed so that debt began to rise in proportion to income. Many people used all of their remaining rounds just to pay off the man in the hat. Many went bankrupt and had to work for others who themselves could barely afford to fulfill their obligations to the man in the hat. There were fewer and fewer people who could afford to buy chicken products, making it even harder to maintain demand and growth. So, amid an environmental wrecking superabundance of chickens, more and more people had barely enough on which to live.
The only way the human can reconnect with life is reconnecting with the soil.
When you look out into the world and feel like you want the world to be healthy. I mean, want the environment to be healthy, just like you want a human being to be healthy. I feel that relationship with the world.
Things as connected in myself as a part of the system, and I don't know how to think like that. In that way, I think that the whole story of me is woven in everything that's already there.
All human beings really, including myself, have a responsibility to the land. Like the land is, in a sense, almost like part of us.
I think we need to start grow love.
Turn our resources towards life instead of death.
Exactly. That's what we need to do. We have no option. I think there's no option. Okay, so we solved the work problem. That's great.